Government means it is a kind of, it's a group of people who are vested with the responsibility of policy implementation in the country. Okay, government is a group of people who are vested with the policy implementation in the country. And who is giving such policy implementation role to the group of people? By the people. So how the people are giving? People are giving by the means of legislature. By the means of legislature. Legislature will empower this group of people to implement the policies in the country. So in India, who is the group of people? Tell me. Who is the group of people? Prime Minister and Council of Ministers at the union level, Chief Minister and Council of Ministers at the state level. So this is what government. This is what government. They are charged with the responsibility of implementing the policy. And this policy covers every aspect of your life. This policy covers every aspect of your life from the birth till the death. In other words, governance can also be defined as the action part of the government. Action part of the government is nothing but governance. Whatever government does for the people, that comes under the category of governance. Okay, governance means the action part of the government. So whatever the government does for the people, that is called as government. Of course, the term governance is very, very loose term. You can't have a specified meaning or specified definition for the governance. So in different perspectives, different definitions are given. For example, United Nations Development Programme, UNDP. This has given a definition that the exercise of administrative, political and economic authority. What is that? Exercise of administrative, political and economic authority to manage the affairs of the country. To manage the affairs of the country. Affairs of the country. That is called governance. Did you understand the meaning? Exercise of administrative, political and economic authority for what reason? To manage the affairs of the country. Managing affairs means various affairs in the country. For example, how a person has to live in the society, what he has to speak and what he is not supposed to speak, what profession he has to undertake, what profession he is not supposed to undertake. Are you able to understand? What kind of organizations can be established, what kind of organizations cannot be established? What is his status of marriage? What is his status of his relationship with the fellow human beings? Okay, in every aspect that is regulated by the state, by the exercise of administrative, political and economic authority. Okay, so that is about the governance. So to manage the affairs of the country. So let us understand other aspects of the governance. First of all, let us understand what is constitution, what is polity and what is governance. This differentiation we must make. Okay, what is constitution? What is constitution? Tell me. Yes, constitution is nothing but it is the fundamental law of the land. You can also call the constitution as a supreme law of the land. Supreme law of the land. Right. What does the constitution contains? Constitution contains number of provisions. What does the provision talk about? The provision talk about how the state is constituted and what kind of relationship the state has with the people. That is nothing but constitution. So constitution talks about what is the do's of the government, what are the don'ts of the government. What the government is supposed to do for the people, that is explained in the constitution. So that is the reason why any affair, any activity, anything that happens in the country, that must be done in accordance with the constitution. If anything goes, whenever anything goes in clash with the constitution, what will happen? That can be declared invalid by the Supreme Court. Are you able to understand? So that is what the constitution. Constitution is the fundamental law of the land. Then what is the polity? What is the polity? How the constitution is implemented in reality, that is nothing but polity. Okay? The functional part of the constitution. The functional part of the constitution is nothing but polity. So polity can also be understood in another way. So it can also be the study of political system in the country. The study of political system in the country. It is also called as polity. So the functional side of the constitution is nothing but polity. Then what is governance? Just now we have discussed what is governance. Action part of the government. Action part of the government covering every aspect of the life of the people. So from the birth till the death. Okay, you must understand that is the governance. Okay, right. So that is constitution. Constitution is nothing but fundamental law of the land, and polity is nothing but functional part of the constitution. Governance is nothing but the action part of the government. So let us understand this governance in more detailed manner, because the details of the governance is very, very important. If we want to understand the essence of the governance, we have to understand this definition also. So what is the definition is about? So this definition says governance relates to management of all such processes. Management of all such processes. Processes which define the environment. Processes which define the environment. Suppose what is our environment? It is not the physical environment I am talking about. It is an environment which is a political environment. Suppose, tell me, do you have the right to free speech and expression? Yes. Suppose if you are prevented from speaking up to your mind, who will come at your rescue? Supreme Court. So your fundamental rights are guaranteed. So what kind of environment that has been created? A liberal environment that has been created. Are you able to understand? So the liberal environment is created. So this liberal environment, what does it do? It permits and enables the individuals to raise their capacity levels. You are coming and learning, you are coming and getting coaching. So what does it mean? You are raising your capacity levels. Suppose anybody stopping you from taking the civils coaching, nobody stops you, because the system is allowing you, the system is creating such an environment so that you will be able to raise your capacity levels. On one hand, enlarge the set of available choices on the other. You also have the choices, which service you are supposed to join, central services or state services. It is up to you. So it means the governance will try to create such environment where it will be able to raise the capacity of the individuals, and it will also allow the people to take their choices. Suppose if I ask you, what is development? Development means the progressive change in the quality of the life of the people is development. But according to Amartya Sen, development means increasing the choices of the people. Development means increasing the choices of the people. Suppose there is only one pharmacy here, that is not development. If there are multiple pharmacies, that is a development. So you must be able to choose your services. That is nothing but development. So what the government is doing? It is expanding the available choices. Are you able to understand? That is what the governance. So governance essentially, it is a management of all such processes which define the environment and which permits and enables the individuals to raise their capacity levels, and which will also enlarge the set of available choices on the other. So this is what the governance. Right. These processes, what do these processes cover? These processes cover social, economic and political aspects of the people. Social, economic and political aspects of the people. Suppose you understand, if a person wants to establish an organization. Recently, the NIA is launching a kind of investigation against PFI. PFI is an institution. Okay. So this particular institution has been branded as a illegal institution, so which is connected with the terrorist activities. This is what the allegation. You have the right to form your own associations according to Article 19 Class 1 Subclass C. Right to form union, association and cooperatives. It is your fundamental right. But you are prevented from establishing such kind of institutions. Why? Because government is managing such environment, it is creating such an environment which will be able to enable the people to raise their capacity and increase the choices. But this particular environment is decided by the governance. This environment is decided by the governance. Not only that, social and economic aspects. For example, do you know child marriage is prohibited in the country? Yes or no? Why it is prohibited? Because the children are not in the right age to get married because of the social, psychological reasons and physiological reasons. For that reason, the state will be creating certain rules and regulations so that the people cannot violate in the social life also. Economic aspects, the money laundering is nothing but it is an economic offense. That is also regulated by the government. You understand? All these aspects are covered under the concept of governance. So that's why governance is very, very broader concept. You can't confine the governance only to the paper 2. Even sometimes those topics which come under the paper 3 also comes under the concept of the governance. For example, recently central government has launched PM Gati Shakti Yojana. PM Gati Shakti Yojana. That question was asked in the examination. The effective implementation of the PM Gati Shakti Yojana requires a coordination between the government and private sector. Usually what we generally expect, this topic comes under the economy. But what is happening? it is also coming under the polity and governance. Why? Because in the name of governance, what the government is doing, it is regulating political, social and economic aspects of the society. So this is what the governance. Tell me, what is the governance? It is the action part of the government. And what does the governance, what is the purpose of the governance? To raise the capacity levels of the individuals and also to increase the choices of the people. This is what the essence of the governance, right? Did you understand the definition? And next important dimension, that's why I told you in the beginning itself, governance, the term governance is such a very, very loose term. Definitely it will accommodate multiple definitions, okay, right. So governance also involves all the processes and stages involving policy making and policy implementation. So all the processes and stages involving policy making and policy implementation is called as governance. What is policy? Tell me. What is policy? Policy is expressed in the form of government decisions. The government decisions are usually taking the name of public policy. Public policy is also very, very broader term which includes rules, regulations, laws, ordinance, bylaws. Everything comes under the definition of the public policy. Even making of the policy and implementation of the policy comes under the purview of the governance. See, you understand, this definition is not an ordinary definition. Why I am saying it is not ordinary? Because in the year 2022, just this year's governance paper, if you try to see, there is a question. The national parties encourage centralization of powers, and state political parties in favor of states' autonomy. Comment. Are you able to understand? National parties are in favor of centralization. State parties are in favor of states' autonomy. You understand why the political parties are brought in the center and state relations? You understand? This question is primarily intended to address the matter of the center-state relations. But what dimension you are able to see here? The political party dimension you are able to see. So what does it mean? In India, public policy is not the exclusive domain of the government itself. The public policy also takes the active cooperation of the non-state actors and state actors. For example, the public policy is very much inclusive. It is influenced by the pressure groups, it is influenced by the NGOs, it is influenced by the self-help groups, cooperatives, etc. along with the political parties. In this dimension, they have asked you, what is that? National parties generally favor centralization, state parties generally favor state autonomy. Comment. So that's why every aspect we must be able to view through the prism of the governance, So of course in the upcoming classes, I will be discussing the mains questions also in order to contextualize the subject, because remote learning does not help your preparation. So when I talk about any point in the class, definitely that must be having examination relevance. Otherwise, that will be an empty talk. Okay. So in this way, we must be able to understand the demand of the examination. Okay. So public policy means it is a process and stages involving policy making and implementation. Okay. That is nothing but governance. So next, let us see what are the stakeholders. Okay. We will discuss the concept and then we will discuss the syllabus, because that can easily connect your subject. Okay. So what is that? State is a major stakeholder. Why the state is the major stakeholder? Reason is, according to the Aristotle, the state, he viewed the state as being able to meet the whole facets of the good life. So state is indispensable for the people to ensure the good life. So without the active cooperation of the state, without the active functioning of the state, the good life is not possible according to Aristotle. So that's why the state is the major stakeholder in the process of the governance. Right. So actually, why state means actually the political authority, political, economic and administrative authority is vested with what? State itself. State is the agency which exercises the, what is that? Political, economic and administrative authority in the country. So hence state is an important stakeholder in the process of the governance. So state provides you the platform how the policies are to be implemented, because the policy guideline is shown by the state itself. So then accordingly the things will be implemented in the country. That's why state is the major stakeholder. So what are the organs of the state? Tell me. State consists of legislature, executive and judiciary. Legislature, executive and judiciary. So what are the respective functions of these agencies? Tell me. What is the purpose of the legislature in the country? Yes? Yes, it is a law making house. Why does it make the laws in the country? What is law in fact? What is the meaning of law? A set of rules and regulations which are enforceable in nature. That is nothing but law. So set of rules and regulations, and these rules and regulations must be enforced. If these rules and regulations are not enforced, these are not laws. Okay, only when these are enforced, these are called as laws. And another meaning coming to the law is nothing but expression of the public will. Law is nothing but expression of the public will. Am I right? Yes. The legislators will be expressing the public will in the form of laws. Tell me, if I ask you, how many of you are in favor of violence? None of you might be in the favor of violence, because it is your opinion. That opinion is translated in the form of Indian Penal Code. So that's why law is nothing but it is an expression of public will. So the public representative will be expressing the public will in the form of law. And what is another important role, tell me, of the legislature? It will be holding the executive accountable. It will be holding executive accountable. It means it will ensure a responsible government in the country. A responsible government in the country. That responsibility is enforced by the legislature by means of various parliamentary procedures. For example, accountability mechanisms. For example, question hour, zero hour, no confidence motion, confidence motion. These are all the tools in the hands of the legislature to ensure executive's accountability on continuous basis. Right. So that's why the legislature is also an important agency in the governance. Okay, so that's why policies are not just made by the government itself. It is made by the legislature, it is made by the executive, it is made by the judiciary also. See, this kind of questions would come. What is the question? Discuss the essential conditions for the exercise of legislative powers by the governor. Discuss the legality of re-promulgation of ordinances by the governor without placing them before the legislature. Do you understand? What does it pertain to? Yes. First of all, tell me, ordinance is nothing but it's a part of the public policy or not? Yes, it is a public policy. Because just now we have discussed, right? What is what is the governance? All the processes stages involving policy making and policy implementation. What is ordinance? Tell me. Ordinance is nothing but it is a policy. It is part of the policy. So definitely question can come in this manner. Okay, so what is the question? Discuss the essential conditions for the exercise of the legislative powers by the governor. Tell me, what is the legislative power by the governor? It can be called as an ordinance, right? What is ordinance? The legislative power exercised by the executive is called as ordinance. Whether ordinance is temporary legislation or permanent legislation? Temporary. What will be the maximum validity of the ordinance? 6 months, 6 weeks. Are you able to understand? 6 months, 6 weeks. So it means this particular instrument is not to bypass the legislature to make the laws in the land, laws in the country. Just in order to meet the emergency situations, the legislative power is vested with the governor. Are you able to understand? Right. So in this context, discuss the legality of the re-promulgation. What is happening? In many instances, the ordinance is re-promulgated without placing before the legislature. As soon as the ordinance gets lapsed, because after 6 months, 6 weeks, the ordinance will be bound to lapse if it is not approved by the legislature, right? So what is happening in certain situations? They are actually re-promulgating the same ordinance time and again in order to bypass the scrutiny of the legislature. Example, DC Wadhwa versus State of Bihar, RC Cooper versus Union of India. In these two cases, the Supreme Court has categorically held that the re-promulgation of the same ordinance without placing before the legislature, that is nothing but fraud on the constitution. Are you able to understand? In this context, we have to write the answer. Okay, right. So next, what is the judiciary? What is the role of the judiciary in the country? This is another important stakeholder, right? Am I right? This is another important stakeholder in the country. Okay. So what is the role of the judiciary? What is the position of the judiciary in the country? Yes, our polity is founded on separation of powers. What is that? Separation of powers between the legislature, executive and the judiciary. Of course, in the parliamentary form of democracy, you can't find the clear separation of powers between the legislature and executive, because they are founded on the principle of cooperation and coordination. Because in the parliamentary form of democracy, government emerges from the legislature. Definitely it is indispensable, because the relationship between the legislature and executive is indispensable, because the members of the executive are generally members of the legislature itself. So hence clear separation of powers is not possible in the parliamentary form of democracy. But in fact, the judiciary plays an important role here, because it has a role to uphold the constitution and also protecting the rights of the people. Protecting the rights of the people. These are the two important roles. And another important role regarding the judiciary is, it also have the role of interpretation of the constitution. What is that? Interpretation of the constitution. What is interpretation? Tell me. What is the meaning of interpretation? Giving a wider meaning to any provision of the constitution or statute. That is nothing but interpretation. Because laws are made, long ago. For example, you take the Official Secrets Act of 1923. It was legislated during the British era. Indian Contract Act of 1872. It was legislated during the British era. Okay, so every legislation has its own, what is that, social context and political and economic context. When the time changes, it is very much mandatory upon the judiciary to interpret the previous laws in the light of the new and emerging situations. Okay, you have to interpret the laws in the changing dynamics of the society. So that is nothing but interpretation. For example, right to privacy is a fundamental right. Why? Because Supreme Court has interpreted in the Puttaswamy versus Union of India case of 2017, it has interpreted right to life and liberty as a fundamental right. So does it mean the constitution has been amended? No. It is simply interpretative power of the Supreme Court. In this way, the Supreme Court also plays a major role in the policy making in the country and policy implementation in the country. Policy making and policy implementation. I told you, what is the governance? Governance means action part of the government, and which will be managing your social, economic and political spheres of life. Social, economic and political spheres of life. Do you know Vishaka versus State of Rajasthan case? Vishaka versus State of Rajasthan. Sexual harassment at the workplace. Supreme Court has given guidelines, okay, how to prevent the sexual harassment at the workplace. Are you able to understand? So it means, whenever there is an absence of law, what does the Supreme Court do? Supreme Court try to provide a particular law to manage the situation in the country. Okay, only in the year 2013, Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act was enacted. Till that time, Supreme Court guidelines were followed regarding the sexual harassment at the workplace. Similarly, in the case of Delhi pollution, Supreme Court has given many orders. For example, you take MC Mehta versus Union of India case. This is a case, of course, many public interest litigations were filed by the MC Mehta in the Supreme Court in multiple occasions, in multiple matters. For example, in the case of Ganga pollution, he has petitioned the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has given directions. We have to rejuvenate the Ganga river. He also petitioned the Supreme Court in the case of Bhopal gas tragedy. In that case also, the Supreme Court has intervened and given guidelines. Supreme Court also given guidelines in the case of Delhi pollution also in the same MC Mehta versus Union of India case. It means Supreme Court will be playing an interventionist role or interpretative role in order to ensure the effective and quality life for the people. So that's why judiciary also has an equal role in the policy making in the country. Okay, right. So under which article? Article 142 of the Constitution. Supreme Court has a power to deliver you complete justice. Whenever any matter is not addressed by the legislature or executive, in that situation, who comes into the rescue? Supreme Court. Under Article 142 of the Constitution, Supreme Court has a power to render you the complete justice in any matter. Right. So in this context, what kind of questions can be asked? This question is asked. What is that question? The most significant achievement of modern law, in India is the constitutionalization of the environmental problems by the Supreme Court. Discuss this statement with the help of relevant case laws. So in which context we must understand Supreme Court role in the policy making in the country. Supreme Court role in the policy making in the country, because Supreme Court judgments will be having equal validity of the parliamentary enactments. The way the Right to Information Act is respected, in the same fashion, the Supreme Court directions must also be respected. Otherwise, what will happen? What is that? Contempt of the court. Contempt of the court. What is contempt of the court? If you, in two situations, the court can take actions against you. One is if you purposefully decline the image of the court in the eyes of the people, that is scandalizing the judiciary, that is the first dimension. Dimension number 2 is willful disobedience of the judicial orders. What is that? Willful disobedience of the judicial orders. In these two occasions, any person can invite the action from the Supreme Court or High Court. This is nothing but contempt of the court. Again, this matter is under the discussion. Now, in the governance, another question may come, whether the contempt of the court must be reviewed by the judiciary because it is, what is that? Strangulating the right to free speech and expression in the country. So, question can come this way, since the judiciary is a promoter of the liberal society, okay, in this context, it has to revise the contempt of the court to ensure the right to free speech and expression in the country. Are you able to understand? Because judiciary cannot be immune to the criticism, reasonable criticism by the society and people, because criticism is a major tool, okay, where the institution can get the right shape. The shaping of the institution can happen only through the constructive criticism. You must permit that. So, this can also be a question in future. In that way, policy making role also invites the judiciary. So, we have to look at the matters in this dimension also. Next, what is the executive? What is the legislature? Sorry, yes. So, legislature also has an important dimension. In the year 2022, just recently, this question was asked. What is the question? Discuss the procedures to decide the disputes arising out of the election of the member of the parliament or state legislature under the Representation of the People's Act of 1951. What are the grounds on which election of any returned candidate may be declared void? What is the remedy available to the aggrieved party against the decision? You understand? So, this question pertains to the legislature. You understand? Governance is very, very comprehensive subject. It covers executive, judiciary and legislature. So, every institution role is questioned, and the issues related to the institution is also under the question. So, what is RPA? What is Representation of People's Act? What is Representation of People's Act? Actually, in the Constitution of India, under Part 15 of the Constitution, elections are placed. Election Commission of India is charged with the conducting the elections under Article 324 of the Constitution. Election Commission of India is there to conduct elections, superintend the elections in the free and fair manner. So, it is a constitutional body. Election Commission is the constitutional body. What is the constitutional body? It is a body which is established under the provisions of the Constitution. That is nothing but constitutional body, right? But you understand, this Part 15 of the Constitution does not mention any elaborative powers of the Election Commission. It simply mentions the Election Commission to conduct and superintend the elections in the free and fair manner. So, no additional statements are given in the Article 324. Then in case of any clarity that is missing in the Constitution, who has to address? Either judiciary or the legislature. Judiciary or the legislature. So, hence Article 327 of the Constitution also says that the Parliament, the Union Parliament has to enact the laws in order to give the elaborate election method and machinery for the country. Because Election Commission must be equipped with the proper procedures and methods to conduct the elections in the country. And what are the methods to be followed? So, this has to be enacted in the form of a law. So, who has to enact the law? Union Parliament has to enact the law. So, hence Union Parliament has enacted two important laws. One is RPA 1950 and RPA 1951. Representation of People's Act of 1950, Representation of People's Act of 1951. What is 1950? What is RPA 1950? This RPA 1950, first of all, elections, if the elections are to be conducted, what is required? Tell me. First of all, what is required? A constituency is required. Am I right? Constituency is required. Who must be there in the constituency? Voters. Okay, there are two important issues are addressed by the RPA 1950. One, demarcation of the constituencies, how the constituencies are demarcated, that is addressed. Second one is how the voters are registered, how the voters are registered in the country, that is also addressed. Okay, first of all, you have to prepare the ground for the election. Constituencies, and second one is the voters. Who are the voters? What is the constituency? What is the voter? Okay, that is the first one. Secondly, RPA 1950, it deals with the actual procedure involved with the election system in the country. How the election is conducted in the country, that is dictated by Representation of People's Act of 1951. It deals with what are the qualifications of the candidates, okay, what are the disqualifications of the candidates, what is nomination, and who will conduct the elections, and what is the dispute resolution mechanism. Suppose if any ineligible candidate contests in the election, gets elected in the election, so what is the recourse for the lost candidate? Everything is mentioned in the Representation of People's Act of 1951. So it means the structural part is defined under defined under RPA 1950. The procedural part is defined under Representation of People's Act of 1951. Are you able to understand? Right. So now the question is pertaining to which act? The Representation of People's Act of 1951. So we will discuss this particular thing in the upcoming classes, but for the sake of clarification, so there is section 80A of the Representation of People's Act, which will empower the High Court to act as the adjudicator in the matters of the election disputes. Suppose, tell me, in case of election disputes regarding the MPs and MLAs, what is the court to approach? Supreme Court or High Court? High Court. High Court is the court where the High Court will be having the original jurisdiction regarding the matters involving the election disputes of the MLAs and MPs. In the case of President and Vice President, Supreme Court. Okay, that thing you must be able to understand. Secondly, not only High Courts, but also under section 146 of the Representation of People's Act, the Election Commission can also act as a civil court in order to address the election disputes. Suppose in its discovery, if any election candidate, any candidate in the election has filed any false affidavits. What is affidavit? What is affidavit? It is a declaration given by the candidate. He will be declaring about his, giving declaration about his children, spouse, okay? And not only that, what else? The properties and crimes, educational qualification, everything is mentioned. Okay, so how come the people identify who is the right candidate in the election? On the basis of the affidavit. If you provide any false documents or false information in the affidavit, definitely that will be misleading the people. So if that particular candidate is elected in the election, tell me, is it correct election? No, it is not a correct election. So who has to entertain that dispute? Either High Court or Election Commission of India. And you understand, in the case of disqualification of the MLAs, Governor is the authority. In the case of disqualification of the MPs, who is the authority? President of India. President of India. Are you able to understand? Any dispute regarding the elections, any disqualification issue regarding the election, that is to be dealt by the Governor and President on the advice of the Election Commission of India. On the advice of the Election Commission of India. And you have an alternative forum to question such kind of any failure on part of the Election Commission in the High Court under section 80A of the RPA of 1951. Right. In the Representation of People's Act, elaborative provisions are provided regarding the disqualifications of the candidate. Suppose if any person has been sentenced under section 8 of the RPA, for example, if he has been sentenced in any offence more than 2 years, so he will be debarred to contest in the elections for next 6 years. For next 6 years. Under section 123 of the RPA, the candidate is not supposed to indulge in any sort of electoral malpractice. Electoral malpractice. Everything is defined in the Act. You understand? This is what the provisions of the RPA. In the syllabus, you have salient features of the Representation of People's Act of 1950 and 51. That thing we will be going to deal with. Okay. Did you understand the essence of this particular aspect? So this is what the syllabus. Structure, organization and function of the executive and judiciary, ministries and departments of the government. So from this area, these questions have come in the examination. Salient features of the Representation of People's Act. You understand directly from the syllabus. So what else, who else include in the process of the governance in the country? Only government or only state? No. So who else are involving? Constitutional, statutory, regulatory and various quasi-judicial bodies. Okay. Along with the state, main organs of the state, these are the other agencies are involved in the governance process. Okay. Tell me, what are constitutional bodies? Constitutional bodies means those authorities, those bodies which are constituted as per the provisions of the constitution, as per the provisions of the constitution. For example, under article 76 of the constitution, Advocate General, Attorney General. Under article 315 of the constitution, UPSC. Under article 324 of the constitution, Election Commission of India. Under article 148 of the constitution, CAG. So there is a specific provision attached with every organization in the constitution. That is nothing but constitutional body. Similarly, Finance Commission under article 280 of the Constitution. In this way, a specific provision is there in the Constitution for the constitution of the or the establishment of any particular body in the Constitution. That is nothing but constitutional body. Okay, right. So we will discuss what are the various constitutional bodies. Okay, right. So what are statutory bodies? What is statute? Tell me. What is the meaning of statute? Statute means law enacted by the parliament is called as statute. The law given by the Supreme Court is not a statute. Okay, law is something where the bill is passed by the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha and it receives the assent of the President of India. Then only becomes the bill becomes the law or act. So this particular law or act is called as statute. Okay, any agency that has been created by the enactment of an act is called as statutory body. Are you able to understand? Suppose, tell me, what is a bill? What is the meaning of bill? The draft legislation or legislative proposal is called as bill. So that is assented by the legislature and receives the assent of the president, then it becomes a statute. Tell me, any one statutory body in the country, any one statutory body, Central Information Commission is statutory body or not? Yes, it is a statutory body. It has been created under RTA Act of 2005. Okay. SIC also, the State Information Commission. We will be discussing when we deal with the Right to Information Act. These are the two authorities at the union level and state level. If the government officer denies the information, where the individual has to go? To the CAC in the case of central administration, SIC in the case of state administration. These are nothing but statutory bodies. And similarly, NHRC, National Human Rights Commission. It has been created under the Protection of Human Rights Act of 1993. Protection of Human Rights Act of 1993. So since it is created by the statute, it is also called as statutory body. Okay. So constitutional body, statutory body. And next one is, what is regulatory body? Regulatory body means, what is regulatory body? It is a body, it is also created by the statute, but in order to regulate certain aspects of the governmental affairs or the market, that is nothing but regulatory body. For example, Reserve Bank of India, it is a regulatory body, it regulates the banking sector. Okay, Insurance Development and Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority, IRDA, it is an insurance regulator. Competition Commission of India, it is a regulator for the competition in the country. Are you able to understand? So in this way, there are certain regulatory bodies, right? So tell me, why we need to establish regulatory bodies? What is the reason? First of all, one more important aspect we must understand. Have you seen any deity in this particular Navaratri festivals? What is that? Durga Mata. You are able to see some extended arm for the Durga Mata. Have you seen? Ordinarily human beings will have only 2 hands, but Mata will be having multiple hands. It means you can compare the 3 organs, the constitution as a Durga Mata. So these statutory bodies, regulatory bodies and constitutional bodies as the extended arms. Extended arms. Wherever the state requires a specific function to be performed independently, so those are to be performed by the statutory bodies, regulatory bodies and constitutional bodies. Are you able to understand? There are 3 important constitutional bodies if you try to see. One is Election Commission of India, second one is UPSC or SPSC, and third one is CAG. These are the 3 important agencies after legislature, executive and judiciary in the country. Why such importance is attached with these 3 agencies, tell me? Because ECI is the agency which conducts the elections in the free and fair manner. The elections in the country is conducted by the Election Commission of India. So hence we can call Election Commission of India as the watchdog of the democracy. Watchdog of the democracy in the country. Similarly, UPSC. What is the role of UPSC? So executive functioning does not fulfill only with the role of ECI. You have to invite the role of UPSC also. You need to supply efficient officers and meritorious officers to the system, so that they will be guiding the politicians in the implementation of the policies. They will be assisting the politicians. So that is done, that work is done by the UPSC. So hence UPSC is the watchdog of the meritocracy. Watchdog of the meritocracy in the system. And coming to the other agency, what is CAG? What is CAG? Comptroller and Auditor General. So what is the purpose of CAG? Audits the public finances. Audits the public finances. So if I ask you, who is the owner of the public purse in the country? Yes, people. But who will be exercising such ownership in the country? Lok Sabha at the union level, state legislative assembly at the state level. Because without the authority, without the approval of the Lok Sabha or state legislative assembly, no single paisa can be spent by the executive. So how does the Lok Sabha and state legislative assembly gives approval for the public finances? In the form of budget. Are you able to understand? The executive has promised the legislature, I will be spending this 70,000 crore rupees only for the Nhrc. Right. It is a responsibility of the legislature to look after whether the government is living up to its promise or not. Yes or no? Whether the legislators are having that much skill to supervise the government's activity? No. It is very, very complex. It cannot be supervised by the legislators. So hence we have to have a professional agency in the form of CAG. CAG will perform two important functions. What are the two important functions? One function is to see that whether the money being spent for the right purpose or not. Right. For example, Nhrc, whether the money is spent for the Nhrc or not, that will be supervised. Second important function is, it will also see whether the money which is spent in the reasonable limits of the budget or not. Okay, whether the money being spent in the limits of the budget or not, that is also supervised by the CAG. So CAG will be acting as the watchdog of the public purse. Watchdog of the public purse. What is the constitutional name for the public purse? Yes, Consolidated Fund of India and Consolidated Fund of State. Okay, right. So these are the three prime institutions. Next, what is the importance of statutory bodies in the country? Tell me, why we require the statutory bodies? Because these are the statutory bodies will provide the inbuilt controlling mechanism. What is that? Inbuilt controlling mechanism. I told you in the separation of powers, if any agency does anything wrong according to the constitution, who will come into the picture? Judiciary. But every time judiciary can be able to respond to every problem in the country, whether the judiciary strength is supporting that particular responsibility? No. So hence we have created certain dedicated agencies for certain dedicated activities. For example, just now I talked about Nhrc. What is the purpose of Nhrc? It is to see that the human rights cannot be violated. Whenever any human rights violation takes place, this will bring into the notice of the government, and government has to take the action. Okay, right. And another important thing is, whenever any case is being fought in the Supreme Court, the Nhrc can also collude with the victim. So whether, suppose a victim is fighting in any case in the Supreme Court, the Nhrc can also be a party to that particular dispute. Thus it can enable the justice to be delivered to the victim. So in this way Nhrc functions. Similarly, CVC, Central Vigilance Commission. Do you know corruption is very, very dangerous phenomenon in the country, because corruption definitely defeats the very purpose of the governance in the country, right? So you need to prevent the corruption before the corruption takes place. So for that reason you need to have a proper vigilance system. Vigilance system means a proper surveillance system. That surveillance function is provided by the CVC. It is also a statutory body. In an essence, we must understand the statutory bodies are nothing but the creatures of the legislature. Creatures of the legislature. Constitutional bodies are creatures of the constitution. Constitutional bodies are creatures of the constitution. Statutory bodies are creatures of the legislature. Constitutional bodies cannot be amended the way the parliament wants, because Supreme Court in the Keshavanda Bharati case in the year 1973 had held that you cannot amend the constitution by violating the basic structure of the constitution. But in the case of statutory bodies, the liberty is given to the legislature to amend the bodies the way it wants. Are you able to understand? In this way we have the NCBC, National Commission on BC, National Commission on SC, National Commission on ST. In this way we have the constitutional bodies for the protection of the various communities in the country. Okay, we have the constitutional bodies and statutory bodies. The role of these bodies is similar, but the degree of protection is very, very high to the constitutional bodies compared to the statutory bodies. Right. Next one is regulatory body. As I told you, regulatory body will be trying to regulate a particular aspect of the economy. Usually, why the regulatory body? Why can't the government can conduct the regulation also? Are you able to understand my question? Government is there to regulate the activities of the people. then what is the requirement of a special body for the regulation? Because after the liberalization, privatization, globalization, the very outlook of governance is changing in the country. Why it is changing? Because we are inviting the participation of the private sector in the economy. Whenever the private sector comes into the economy, definitely the government cannot regulate such market because there will be a conflict of interest. You just understand, LIC is there and other private insurers are also there. Suppose in the absence of IRDA, if the government, the Minister of Finance itself regulates the insurance sector, tell me the decisions are made in the favor of LIC. So there will be a conflict of interest. So hence, in order to avoid the conflict of interest, in order to offer a level playing field for the public sector and private sector, what are established? Regulatory bodies are established. So they will be ensuring a proper regulatory environment so that nobody should be misusing the liberty that is given to them. Are you able to understand? Similarly, Competition Commission of India. You understand what is the problem we are facing now? For Jio Mobile, previously how much tariff rates were there? 100 rupees, 80 rupees, like that there was there. But periodically what happened? They have increased till the 300 rupees. For every recharge requires 300 rupees. Why? Because initially he came as a entrant into the market and later he captured the market and he became a monopoly. Okay. Because of his monopolistic activities, the Jio monopolistic activities, what happened? Other telecom sector companies are at the losses. Are you able to understand? This cannot be a right situation for the country. Hence, who has to play the important role? Competition Commission of India. Suppose if Jio drops the prices all of a sudden, who has to take the action? Competition Commission of India. So that it cannot be giving any undue advantage for any particular company. So that is that regulatory atmosphere is provided by the Competition Commission of India. Are you able to understand? In this way, you have to understand every governance matter through the perspective of these agencies. Are you able to understand? Right. Next important thing, quasi-judicial bodies. What are quasi-judicial bodies? Tribunals. Okay, quasi-judicial bodies means administrative tribunals, administrative courts are nothing but quasi-judicial bodies. Right. Because as the time passes, definitely what is happening, the burden on the judiciary is increasing. Do you know what is the extent of case pendency in the country? In the Supreme Court itself, 70,000 cases are pending. In the High Courts, more than 50 lakh cases are in pending. To resolve all these cases, it requires millions of years. It is not that easy to resolve. So hence, you need to have the administrative courts. These are called as tribunals. So civil servants will be managing these tribunals. The government will be sitting in the position of the courts. That is nothing but tribunal. So these must also be studied as a part of syllabus. Are you able to understand? So which part of the constitution talks about the tribunals? Which part? Constitution lo a part? Part 14A. Article 323A and Article 323B. These two articles talk about the tribunals. So the moment comes, we will be discussing these aspects. See. Question. Discuss the role of Election Commission of India in the light of the evolution of the Model Code of Conduct. So when you study Election Commission of India as a constitutional body, when you study Representation of People's Act of 1951, why can't you answer this question? Definitely you can answer. What is Model Code of Conduct? It is an informal agreement among the political parties to observe a particular code of conduct in the election system. That is nothing but Model Code of Conduct. Election Commission of India will be implementing such Model Code of Conduct to ensure free and fair elections. Elections cannot be turning to an advantage to the ruling party. For example, there are certain conditions that no ministers in the government during the election campaign, they can't use their official vehicles. No minister cannot mix his administrative tours and political tours during the time of election. Such kind of rules are prescribed by the Model Code of Conduct, and who is the responsible agency? Election Commission of India. Okay, this kind of questions will come in the examination. So it means whatever we learn as a part of governance, we must understand with some perspective. So just in a mechanical manner, we can't study governance. We must be able to study the governance so that we will be able to answer every question in the examination. That kind of perspective we have to build up. Right. So another question, NHRC. Okay. So NHRC in India can be most effective when its tasks are adequately supported by other mechanisms that ensure the accountability of the government. In the light of above observation, assess the role of NHRC and as an effective complement to the judiciary and other institutions in promoting and protecting the human rights standards. Question is very, very bigger. but he is asking what is the efficacy of the NHRC. Simple. If we have the information, we can directly write the answer. Okay, you must have some catchy points. Easily, whenever you look at the NHRC, some points must be coming to your mind. One, NHRC is a recommendatory body. It can't take any action on the government officials. It need to take the support of the government itself. Okay, so NHRC has certain limitations because it cannot look into the cases with a particular time limitation. There is a time limitation attached with the NHRC. That must be remembered. Suppose 1 year time during, if any case beyond 1 year time, that cannot be entertained by the NHRC. So such kind of points must flash in your mind. Then you can easily write the answer. So another important question to see here, for achieving desired objectives, it is necessary to ensure that the regulatory institutions remain independent and autonomous. Discuss in the light of experience in the recent past. It was a question asked in the year 2015. So what was the debate at that point of time, you know? RBI versus government. RBI stands for what policy? Monetary policy. Government stands for fiscal policy. This policy sometimes clash with the government policy, because monetary policy tries to restrict the money flow in the economy, to reduce the inflation in the economy. But the fiscal policy tries to enhance the employment opportunities in the people by spending effectively by the government. Okay, it fuels the demand, it fuels the inflation. It will try to prevent the inflation. These are the roles which are having the conflicting roles. So in this context, what happened? Government tried to wield more control on the Reserve Bank of India. In that context, this particular question was asked. Okay, so we must be, whenever we look at the paper, whenever we go through the paper, we must be able to create a list of examples. The moment we look at the any particular newspaper item, we must understand where it matches, where it fixes. In the syllabus, in which part of the syllabus it can be fixing. Secondly, how to write the example. Especially in the answer writing, you can't chase the examples. You can't detailedly write about the examples. Don't write the story. You make the passing reference regarding any particular issue. So that kind of collection you can make easily by means of note making. Okay, right. So who are the other partners in the governance? Okay, let's go back to the meaning of governance. It covers the state, civil society and market. Previously, government was a monopoly with respect to governance. But now what is happening? Government is collaborating with the civil society and market, and each of which is critical for the sustaining the human development. So in other words, governance is nothing but it is a collaboration between the civil society, state and market. It means why we need to collaborate with the civil society. What is the reason? Tell me. Just you guess any reason behind this particular policy. One important reason is there is a reduced capacity of the state. Reduced capacity of the state. State takes the decisions remotely from the people. And state may not be able to understand the repercussions of any given policy. Any policy will be effectively implemented in the country the moment it takes the participation of the people, participation of the various stakeholders in the society. Do you know in Hyderabad there is a program called as 5 rupees meal program? Do you know this program? What this program is about? People will be provided with the cheap meals, with the quality meals. Okay, right. The government has given this contract to Akshaya Patra Foundation. Why? Because Akshaya Patra Foundation has a dedication and commitment to ensure the welfare of the people. So those who are having such commitment, they are better agencies to implement the public policy. Bureaucracy itself is not required in the society. If any other private partner or any civil society is available, let us give these functions to that civil society. So the commitment is important, rule boundedness is not important. What are the evils of the bureaucracy? The bureaucracy in India is riddled with the corruption, rule orientation than the goal orientation. Suppose even you become the administrator also. Okay, suppose any victim comes to you with the torn dresses and so he is in the pathetic situation. He seeks support from your side. Then you will ask him, do you have Aadhaar, do you have a ration card? If he does not have Aadhaar and ration card, your system cannot help him. Even personally you may be able to help him because of your morality and ethics. But the system does not permit. What is the problem here? Rule orientation rather than goal orientation. Nepotism, favoritism, okay, corruption, these are the evils of the bureaucracy. How to avoid these evils? We have to avoid the bureaucracy itself. Okay, so then you have to take the cooperation of the civil society, market and state. Are you able to understand? So in this way, this particular question I asked you, Gati Shakti Yojana requires the cooperation between the government and the private sector. In which context this was asked? Other partners of the governance. Okay. So that's why governance is very, very dynamic concept. It is not any monopolistic activity in the current times. Rather, governance can be called as, the present governance can be called as networked governance. What is that? Networked governance. With what is a networked governance? The government will be playing an active role along with the other actors in the society. Okay. So for example, this is a boat. Just assume this is a boat. This is steering, and these are the rowing points. Okay, right. Previously, government itself was at the steering, and government itself was responsible for the rowing of the boat. What is rowing? Propelling the boat forward. That is nothing but rowing. So both rowing as well as steering was the function of the government. But after this particular liberalization, privatization and globalization, what is happening? Government is collaborating with the other partners in the governance, civil society or market, private sector and the NGOs, voluntary sector, community based organizations, cooperatives, self-help groups. There are list of active actors in the civil society who are collaborating with the state in the process of the governance. If you try to see, tell me whether is it in the compliance with the constitutional principles? Whether is it in the compliance with the constitutional principles? Are we going according to the constitution? Yes or no? Actually yes. If you try to see Gandhian approach towards the development, Gandhiji always talked about the decentralization of the governance. Decentralization of the governance. If you try to look at the Gandhiji's Swaraj, what is that village republic concept, Swarajya concept. In this concept, Gandhiji was talking about two important things. Of course, what is that? Decentralization of political power and decentralization of the industrial activities. Decentralization of the industrial activities. So what is a village republic? Village republic means it is a self-sufficient village which will be able to produce the things the village wants. Secondly, it will be able to administer itself in the independent manner. So what we require? Self-governance is required and self-production is required. Not only that, Gandhiji was also a strong advocate of the debureaucratization in the society. Don't get feared. Debureaucratization. Debureaucratization means reducing the influence and role of the bureaucrat in the society, not eliminating the bureaucracy. Okay, elimination of bureaucracy, it is not elimination, rather reducing the role of the bureaucracy, debureaucratization. So what we are doing here? We are involving civil society, market in collaboration, thus we are reducing the role of the bureaucracy. Okay, we are able to ensure the self-sustenance of the people by means of cooperative societies. Tell me, what are cooperatives? Cooperative society means, yes, these are the informal organizations which are owned by the people and which are controlled by the democratic methods and which will be having open membership. And every cooperative will be having a common goal. Either politically, it may be having common goal, economically or socially. Political, social and economical manner, they will be having common goals. So such agencies are called as cooperatives. Do you know the cooperatives got the constitutional status in India? Which constitutional amendment? 97th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2011. Okay, it has made certain fundamental changes under Article 19 Class 1 Subclass C. Previously, right to form unions and association was a fundamental right. Now, right to form unions, associations and cooperatives also became fundamental right. And nextly, Article 43B of the Constitution talks about it is the state has to promote the cooperatives in the country. And Part 9B of the Constitution, which talks about the cooperatives regulation in the country. Are you able to understand? So then, in the upcoming examination in the year 2023, definitely a question can come on the cooperatives. After the 97th Constitutional Amendment, what is the impact of this particular Constitutional Amendment Act and how effectively are they functioning? So such kind of question we can expect. Okay, right. So the syllabus component is developmental processes, the development industry, role of NGOs, self-help groups, various groups and associations, donors, charities, institutional and other stakeholders. This is what the syllabus component. See, this question was asked in the year 2021. Again, pressure groups play a vital role in influencing public policy making in India. explain how the business associations contribute to the public policies. Okay, what are the roles of FICCI, what are the roles of other business organizations in public policy making in the country. Okay, so definitely the question does not directly come in the examination. They will definitely ask the question in a particular perspective. Okay, while we are learning the current affairs, we must build the perspective to answer the question in the examination. Next important question, do you, just 2022 question it is. So what is the question, you know? Do you agree with the view that increasing dependence on donor agencies for development reduces the importance of the community participation? Importance of the community participation in the development process. Justify with your answer. Okay, what is the question? Increasing the dependence on the donor agencies. What are the donor agencies? Charity based organizations, NGOs. Okay, they will be supporting, they will be funding the communities. Okay, what is the impact of such funding over the communities? What is the impact of such funding over the communities? Right? Tell me why the community participation is important. Why the community participation is important? To make the development is a real process. People must be the stakeholders in the process of development. You can't impose the development all of a sudden on the people. People must be owning the public scheme. People must be owning the public program. They must be participating in the process of the development. The state will be assisting and facilitating, but the community will be participating. There are various platforms for the community participation. There are various platforms. For example, self-help groups, community participation. What are the self-help groups? These are the association of the women. Self-help groups are nothing but association of the women, especially from the informal economy. Right? Why the informal economy? Why not the formal economy? Because in the informal economy, the women do not have the property rights. Usually in the villages, women don't have the property rights. Again, you go to the patriarchy, the problem of patriarchy in the society. Right? But that patriarchy cannot be a barrier for the women development and women empowerment in the country. So how to address that problem? Let us use the traditional methods. Women are the good savers of money. Let us use that particular method in enriching their skills and knowledge regarding the social processes. So these SSGs are founded on the principle of thrifting. What is the meaning of thrifting? Saving the money in the smaller amounts in the bank. When the money is saved for a long time, what will happen? They will gain the confidence of the banker. When they gain the confidence, what will happen? What will happen? Without the requirement of collateral, you will be given with the loans. What is the collateral? It is a property that you have to show to the banker if you want to get the loans. So that is what the self-help groups. Okay. Similarly, just now I discussed about the cooperatives. It is also a form of community participation. Grama Sabha. What is that? Grama Sabha. It is also community participation. What is Grama Sabha? The legislature at the village level is nothing but Grama Sabha. Who will be the members of Grama Sabha? Every eligible voter in the village becomes a member of the Grama Sabha. In that way, these agencies must be participating in the process of the development. But generally what will happen, if any donor is giving you money, that particular donation will be having some attached utilities. Suppose when the donor gives the money for the sake of development in a particular activity, the community must be involving only in that particular activity, not in the other activity. They will be losing their self-direction, self-control. Okay, those kind of issues you have to write. So what must be done? What must be the outcome of the governance in the country? Right? Till now what we have discussed, what is governance? What are the stakeholders of the governance? Okay, then what are we expecting out of this governance? Yes, definitely the constitutionalism. What is the constitutionalism? Following the values of the constitution, and while following these values, we have to ensure the attainment of certain goals in the life. That is nothing but constitutionalism. Constitutionalism is a common ideology for both state and citizens. For example, if you find any problem in the day-to-day life, where do you approach? Would you approach mafia or court or police? Court and police. Why? Because constitutionalism. Because you have to resolve the conflict in your personal life only through the legal means and the constitutional means. That is nothing but constitutionalism. So constitutionalism essentially it deals with the following the values of the constitution. Following the values of the constitution while attaining the goals in your life. That is nothing but constitutionalism. Similarly, the state also has to follow the constitutionalism in the country. So the essence of the constitutionalism for the state is nothing but welfareism. The establishment of the welfare state is the goal of the constitution. So the constitutionalism in the country is being manifested in the form of welfareism. So we have to establish what kind of state? Welfare state. What is the meaning of welfare state? Welfare state is a state which tries to safeguard the welfare and well-being of the people in the country. In what spheres? Socially, economically and politically. Are you able to understand? Ensuring the welfare and well-being of the people socially, economically and politically. Which article talks about that in the constitution? Article 38 of the constitution. Article 38 of the constitution. Article 38 of the constitution says that state has to ensure the social order in which there must be prevalence of social justice, economic justice and political justice. Okay, so this must be attained. So governance must be able to attain the goals mentioned in the Article 38 of the constitution, that is nothing but welfare state. So this Article 38 encapsulates all the other provisions of the DPSP. For example, common civil code, uniform civil code, it comes under the social aspects of the individual. Article 38 covers social aspect also. Are you able to understand? Article 41, right to work. What is the sphere of activity? Economic activity. For example, Article 50, separation of judiciary from executive, that comes under the political aspect. Okay, this Article 38 talks about the welfareism in the country. So you have to achieve that. So the constitution is a barometer for the success of the government in the country. What is a barometer? Constitution itself is a barometer, because in the preamble we have declared, we the people of India have declared to secure the justice, liberty, equality and fraternity among the people. Okay, so definitely the government has to strive very much hard to achieve those goals in the preamble. So ultimate goal is welfare state. So the syllabus is welfare schemes for vulnerable sections, of population by the center and states, and the performance of these schemes, mechanisms, laws, institutions, bodies constituted for the protection and betterment of these vulnerable sections. Everything comes under this. Any protective legislation, any developmental legislation definitely comes under this particular aspect. Okay, for example, you take what is that Right to Education Act of 2009 comes under this particular thing. Similarly, MG Narega, Mahatma Gandhi National Employment Guarantee Act comes under this particular.